Good morning. Good morning. Welcome over to our stream today. So fantastic to have you aboard. We have a really fantastic week of comics that just went ahead and sunsetted us this past week. Also, next week is looking really, really exciting too. Why don't we go ahead and just start from the beginning here? So this week we had the excellent Storm #1, the fantastic X-Men issue 5. We also had the wonderful Venom War Chapter 3. I just think there's so many great comic books that Marvel's frankly publishing each and every week. It makes these streams so easy to do, like every single week, which is just, such a massive joy. We have so much to cover this week. I want to start things off by talking about one of my favorite single issues from Marvel's X-Men line this past week. It might surprise you because you would think it would be Storm, but actually, there's something about this most recent chapter of X-Men really focusing in on Cyclops' team that just captured so much of my interest. Frankly, the main adjectiveless X-Men series has always been on my radar because I love the really interesting cast of characters. We have some Marvel mainstays like Cyclops. We have characters like Beast who have been a part of so many previous X-Men teams. But frankly, some of the characters that I think are really shaping up or shaking up the formula of this adjectiveless X-Men book are like Psylocke, Kid Omega, Temper, and even Magic and Juggernaut. I love the relationship that these two characters are forming specifically. X-Men issue 5 did a wonderful job fleshing out Kwanin as Psylocke. She has an upcoming ongoing series, so I think starting to introduce some of the brand new context of her brand new comic book, just within the scope of this issue 5 of X-Men alone, is such a great way to move the plot forward for this book. By the way, we haven't mentioned it yet. X-Men 5, written by Jed MacKay, featuring artwork from Ryan Stegman, inks from J.P. Mayer, Livesey, and Ryan Stegman, plus colors from Marte Gracia, and letters over from VC's Clayton Cowles. So after we get the scene really introducing what's going on with Psylocke here, Jed MacKay actually pits Quentin Quire together over with the character of Kwanin, which leads them to a fascinating scenario where they have to look into the mind of a mutant named Ben Liu. Following this sequence, there's some really massive spoilers about the revelations that Jed MacKay was hinting at in the first couple chapters of his X-Men book, talking about that new school that rose up from the ashes of Orcus, as well as the mysterious 3K group. I want to give a quick spoiler warning. I mean, we really want to talk about these X-Men comics in a ton of depth, but we need to talk spoilers in order to do it. Towards the end of this 5th issue of X-Men, the character of Psylocke actually reveals that the character of Cassandra Nova is working alongside this mysterious 3K group, which looks like it's propelling X-Men to its latest huge plot revelation. For me, this really interesting cliffhanger was so excellent to see because I was a big fan of the first couple issues of Jed MacKay's Avengers run, but I think it kind of wore out of steam because he waited a little bit too long to position Murden and the rest of the Twilight Court against the Avengers. Thankfully, though, it looks like this issue is finally getting everything in gear, setting up Psylocke and really giving a big incremental step towards the next From the Ashes storyline over for the adjectiveless X-Men series. Without further ado, I want to officially welcome you over to our stream today. We already previously hinted at this, but we had a really fantastic week of X-Men comics. I feel like this latest issue of X-Men finally moved us a little bit closer to the next phase of From the Ashes. I feel like UncannyXMen has also been building towards a huge climax with that mysterious characters of the Outliers, as well as the raid on Grey Malkin event that's going to spread out across these two upcoming comics. Frankly, in the main adjectiveless X-Men series, I'm actually really getting the idea here that the publisher is actually going to flesh out some of the interesting revelations involving the mysterious 3K group, probably after Raid on Grey Malkin. So I know we have some really fascinating stories on board for the main adjectiveless X-Men series over with Cyclops. So we already hinted at over in our preview of X-Men 5 from the beginning of the stream that the character of Quanon is actually going to be spinning off into her own series. Why don't we go ahead and check out Marvel Comics' most recent Psylocke #1 that's still yet to hit stores. Okay, so this is League of Comic Geeks. This is the solicitation here for Psylocke #1 coming out on November 13th. We know previously that this series was taking place over in Japan. Plus, this comic book has just a great creative team attached to it. We have Alyssa Wong coming off of just the fantastic Spirit World series over at Marvel Comics. Plus, we're joined by Vincenzo Carrazzo, who has done such excellent work over on the main Iceman series. I was really confused looking at this cover initially why Cyclops was featured on it, and I think we have a really strong idea of the fact that Cyclops may have a presence in this series just because Psylocke is currently on his team of X-Men characters. So tons of cool stuff involving this brand new Psylocke series. Also, we have a solicitation for the next upcoming issue of X-Men. The one that we just talked about and covered towards the beginning of our stream was issue 5. And in just a moment, we're going to put the cover for issue 6 up on the screen here. So here it is right now, coming in over from Ryan Stegman. For me, this is so wonderful. I think the characters of Magic and Temper are so interesting within the course of this new X-Men team. They're younger female heroes. I think it's going to be really interesting watching them establish the relationship that they have with each other. And for me, it's just so fantastic to see Idie implemented in all these different scenarios throughout the X-Men comics. I'm really starting to get attached to her as a character. I really love the sequence that she had over with Magneto in some previous X-Men issues too. Jed McKay's doing such a great job with their character. I hope he keeps building and building on where she came previously. Also, it looks like Magic is kind of devastated from some of the after effects of Krakoa, very similar to Kitty Pryde. I think it's going to be really interesting to see her adjust to becoming a regular X-Men after she suffered such heavy losses as all the mutants did, just as a response to the Hellfire Gala. Okay, so it looks like this one actually takes place in Cyclops' base over in Merle, Alaska. Let's go ahead and check out the solicit or the preview text for this issue 6 tucked away towards the back of X-Men issue 5. While the X-Men attempt to unravel the globe-spanning conspiracy arrayed against them, Temper and Magic work to investigate one closer to home. Merle, Alaska holds more secrets than just the ones kept within the factory, and the two must leave the safety of their headquarters and hit the streets for answers. So there we go. We have all these references towards Cyclops' current base called the Factory, an abandoned Sentinel factory operating out of Merle, Alaska. I'm trying to think of any interesting plot revelations we've had in previous X-Men issues. I mean, first of all, we had a really interesting, frozen Sentinel tease towards the back of X-Men Chapter 1. Also, in more recent issues of X-Men, we've seen the Agent Ludwig character really put some pressure on Cyclops with the rest of the government. So I'm wondering if maybe Temper and Magic are following up on that government subplot involving the factory, or if they're going to be embarking on some other mission here. Just that being said, I think these are two characters that probably need some of the biggest characterization. So once again, really happy to see Jed McKay working with his really interesting cast of characters in terms of his X-Men ongoing. Also, I just want to stress, it's really weird. UncannyXMen is like the main X-Men book over at Marvel right now, but I just feel like there's something about X-Men that's a little bit more tapped into the continuity of Marvel. And I feel like that's due in part to the really interesting cast of characters like Temper, Magic, and Quentin Quire in this comic book that all feel like they're so important to the rest of the X-Men line. Also, I just want to quickly hand it over to this adjectiveless X-Men series for doing a wonderful job making their continuity feel so important. NYX is working with such a big cast of characters, but I feel like that book is a little bit disconnected from the greater Marvel universe. Man, I don't feel like this comic book has any of those issues, and it can be really, really aggressively weird. Really enjoying this adjectiveless X-Men series. Let's go ahead and see what else we have to cover. If you liked our coverage of the adjectiveless X-Men series, I have fantastic news because Marvel Comics actually gave us an early look at some interior pages of the upcoming issue 7. It looks like this one is really dialing up the animosity between Cyclops and Magneto in this brand new comic book. This one is coming in over from Newsarama, written by George Marston. X-Men 7 starts to answer questions about the team's headquarters and mission that have lingered since the relaunch. I'm wondering what other kind of questions and sentiments are arising as a result of the factory. Also, I'm wondering if Cyclops is not only feeling the pressure from the government, but from one of his other X-Men colleagues as well, Magneto. Let's go ahead and see what Cyclops is going to uncover in the lead up to the Grey Malkin crossover in the adjectiveless X-Men 7. The X-Men have recently set up shop in a new headquarters, an abandoned Sentinel factory in Merle, Alaska, in the shadow of a massive frozen Sentinel. When I was first talking about that Sentinel, I used the word frozen, really hoping that I got that right. And apparently I did, according to this article. I thought that was a great way as well for Marvel to reference Krakoa. It feels like as a result of almost each and every comic book in From the Ashes, there's some plot thread or just, some shadow of Krakoa lingering in the background of the comic book here. The unlettered pages from writer Jed MacKay, guest artist Neto Diaz, and colorist Marte Gracia show X-Men co-leaders Cyclops and Magneto getting into a heated argument with each other before having to turn and take down the massive Sentinel, apparently showing some of the origin of the new X-Men headquarters and their mission. Check out a gallery of pages, as well as the cover by regular series artist Ryan Stegman. Okay, so this one is transitioning the X-Men artwork ever so slightly towards Marvel artist Neto Diaz. Neto Diaz actually, as I found, has a ton of different styles here. I really enjoyed some of the work he contributed towards that recent Apocalypse miniseries, and I think he's doing a really good job following up Ryan Stegman and trying to balance out the complicated tone between Cyclops and Magneto on some of these pages. In particular, we have some great reaction shots from Magneto showing just how angry at Cyclops he potentially is in this sequence. The next page also references some of the opening pages from Ryan Stegman and X-Men, showing just the full scope of the X-Men Sentinel factory, but it looks like we have an angry robot over in the background causing the fight between Scott and Magneto to take a temporary pause. Here we go. This next page shows the two characters leaping into action. It looks like Magneto is propelling them over with Cyclops' car using the metal. I love that idea here. I think visually this page is really, really solid. I do wish there were a couple details that were enhanced here. I'm particularly looking at the scale of Magneto's helmet in proportion to his head over in the background. Also, the way that that Magneto's arms are moving, I just think that the anatomy is a little bit exaggerated, and I would love for that detail over from Neto Diaz to be squared away in some upcoming comics. This page is really, really fantastic, giving a more canted angle to really build up a ton of tension here between Cyclops and his enemies over in Merle, Alaska. I'm loving the panel in the middle as well, teasing the really strained facial expression over from Cyclops. And then here's the cover over from Ryan Stegman. I can kind of see the differences in the artwork. It seems like Stegman just has a little bit more detail in terms of his anatomy as opposed to Neto Diaz, but I love Diaz's really exaggerated facial expressions and just how legible it is to read some of the complicated character dynamics with his hyper-exaggerated line. Okay, let's go ahead and check out the end of this article, and then we'll go ahead and preview the first issue of Storm. The Iron Knights, what does the town of Merle, Alaska owe the X-Men? Asked Marvel's official description of X-Men 7. Where did the defunct Sentinel looming all over the town come from? And, more importantly, what was it after? These questions have lingered since the start of the ongoing relaunch of the X-Men line, which focuses on 3 flagship titles. X-Men is the first one of those titles, and so far, the story has focused largely on the idea of adult humans suddenly manifesting mutant powers. The mystery just took a turn. Okay, we are getting into the spoilers from X-Men issue 5. Just another quick spoiler warning here. That mystery just took a turn in the most recent issue, X-Men 5, which reintroduced Cassandra Nova as the villain behind the late activations of X genes. X-Men 7 goes on sale November 6th. So, also, we mentioned earlier, this is one of the biggest issues before the Raid on Grey Malkin crossover, pitting Cyclops and Rogue's teams against each other in the weeks to come over from Marvel Comics. I am very, very happy with this main X-Men series. I feel like Jed MacKay is just juggling an insane amount of plot threads. I really hope he continues to implement this mysterious 3K character as a big foe for the X-Men. I would love eventually to see this threat really rival what Orchis brought over to Krakoa, but that would really be determined based on how long Marvel is going to stick with these ongoing plot threads. Also, I think the publisher has done a really, really good job with Dr. Ellis as well as part of the main Uncanny X-Men series. I feel like those plot threads could really be coming home to roost in an epic story over on Raid on Grey Malkin. All right, that is going to go ahead and do it over for our adjectiveless X-Men coverage for today. I am still just in awe of what that comic book is doing, and I hope Jed MacKay really continues to implement just as much wild continuity as possible. Give me just a moment here, and then we're going to go ahead and shoot into our next story. I want to have some of these interior pages ready to go here before we get into it. Okay, so sadly, our previous stream was cut short just as I was about to dive into Marvel Comics' upcoming Storm series. Frankly, I've been really, really excited about this one for quite a long time here. Seeing Storm in the context of her own ongoing series that's really established as a part of Marvel continuity is so interesting to experience. I feel like Storm had a great character arc towards the X-Men's Krakoa storyline, watching her become the regent of Arakko in battle against Genesis was so great. Really watching her battle against some of the Inhumans towards Judgment Day was also so incredibly memorable. But it looks like Storm is looking to go away from Arakko for a little bit and really just establish herself as her own character over and From the Ashes. Also, another really interesting aspect of From the Ashes is how so many of our X-Men characters are really scattered across the globe. Storm #1 actually pits the character of Aurora over in Atlanta, Georgia. This one also has quite an interesting creative team here. We have the pretty green Murewa Ayodele contributing to the comic book. He previously wrote the I Am Iron Man series for Marvel that was really fantastic alongside Dotun Akande. Also, we have Lucas Werneck coming in after taking just the tremendous victory lap of Immortal X-Men. Out of all the fantastic comic books in the Krakoan era of publishing, outside of House of X and Powers of 10, I feel like Immortal X-Men is probably one of the single best comic books that we've had with these characters, probably in a long time. Watching the artist from that series, Lucas Werneck, join the cast of this Storm brand new ongoing series as the interior artist is so interesting. We're going to look at so much of the beautiful pages in just a few moments. In fact, I'm going to take a look at this preview of Storm #1 that was published on Adventures in Poor Taste and just give some quick cursory thoughts on the comic book. So here's our first interior page of the issue. I think it is just so tremendous to see the massive just sprawling landscapes that artist Lucas Wernick is able to contribute. Also, he does a great job, very similarly to Netho Diaz on that issue of X-Men, with giving really strong facial expressions, but he is so good at giving so much of the detail on the page as well. There were so many issues of Immortal X-Men that were just two characters talking to each other, and Wernick always did a really good job emphasizing the facial details on one character to really get the full emotion and detail out of the page. I think Marewa Ayadeli also introduces some really fascinating narration towards Storm that does a great job building her up as a sort of mythological character towards the beginning and really contextualizing her in all her various roles that she's had over in the Marvel Universe. This is a character who has had a tremendous amount of continuity, costumes, team affiliations, romantic partners. This is a really hard comic book to get right in the context of Marvel. This is our next page, which also does just a really fantastic job recapping where Storm has been, whether it's the Queen of Wakanda, the Regent of Arakko, an X-Men, or even an Avenger, as we've seen most recently from Jed MacKay's Marvel run. Also, I just want to bask in all the incredible negative space and this really complicated page design from Wernick that does a great job dialing up the intrigue and mystery of this X-Men series. These next couple pages are really doing an interesting job setting up this brand new sanctuary that Storm is building over in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm loving all the effects of like these murals of Storm and almost what looks to be like a stained glass picture on some of these windows on the doors too. That just looks absolutely fantastic. So pretty quickly after introducing Storm and the idea of the sanctuary, this book actually flashes back to a disaster happening in Oklahoma City, where the character of Frenzy joins the cast. It's pretty nice watching Frenzy and Storm respond to just a natural disaster across the earth. Also, this leads us to some really, really fascinating plot revelations that I don't want to give any big spoilers for, but it looks like this issue of Storm is actually going to be a little bit more ambitious than some readers expect. This issue really sets up the idea that Storm actually may be headed towards a political campaign, and the final page actually has a big reveal in terms of the overall plot for the series. So in terms of Storm #1, I definitely think that X-Men issue 5 was the stronger of these two comic books as a result of the past From the Ashes line this week, but I still think there were some really great moments in this issue of Storm. And I'm also really hoping that writer Marewa Ayadeli is really headed towards some massive revelation over for Storm and the rest of the X-Men. I'd be really interested on what Storm's take on the raid on Grey Malkin is going to be in the future of Marvel Comics. Okay, so we had a really strong start over to the first chapter of Storm. Why don't we go ahead and talk about the second issue and see what Marvel Comics has in store for this series? First off, there is an interesting blurb at the back of the first issue of Storm that actually sets up a couple of key plot details. It looks like Storm actually had some radiation poisoning when she was working with Frenzy in Oklahoma City. So in order to resolve some of her injuries, she's actually going to meet up with the night nurse, and the background text of the issue even teased the fact that Dr. Voodoo might step in to help her as well. Also, the end of Storm teased some galactic revelations that's really going to be emphasized in this article that we have up on the screen here. Let's go ahead and learn what other plot threads Storm issue 1 introduced in this brand new article coming in from Marvel.com. Storm debuts a new costume in issue 2 of her new solo ongoing series. This one is written over from Anthony Blackwood at Marvel.com. Throughout Marewa Ayadeli and Lucas Wernick's Storm ongoing series, Storm will debut a variety of bold looks, including an all-new costume in issue 2 on sale in November. Written by Marewa Ayadeli and drawn by Lucas Wernick, Storm will position Aurora Monroe as Earth's mightiest mutant as she safeguards the planet against high level threats from her Storm Sanctuary, her new headquarters in Atlanta. I know we talked about this already, but Marvel's editorial is doing such a great job pitting all these different X-Men characters in different aspects around the globe. We have Rogue's team in Louisiana. We have Cyclops taking place out of Merle, Alaska. Storm is now in Atlanta, Georgia. Phoenix is in space. It's just so cool that we can track where all these individual characters are throughout the X-Men line. Showcasing her as the Omega level powerhouse she is, it's a bright new era for the iconic X-Men. And with a new era comes a new costume. In addition to a show-stopping new main costume, Wernick has been busy designing all kinds of stunning looks for Storm's upcoming adventures. And today, fans can check out a reimagined version of Storm's classic silver suit that will debut in Storm Issue 2. Determined to make Storm the most epic series on the stands, Ayadeli and Wernick's opening issue sees Storm diving headfirst into a potential nuclear meltdown. Yeah, looks like that's what caused the radiation poisoning and really what needed Storm to seek out the aid of some of these other beings like Night Nurse or Brother Voodoo. From there, her sagas only escalate as she catches the attention and admiration of omnipotent cosmic forces like Oblivion, as well as supervillains that match her standing as Doctor Doom. You know, it's really interesting. I don't think Marvel's God series went down quite the way they wanted it to, but I'm really happy to see some of these other comic books in the X-Men line and really across Marvel's publishing line to really dial up all these cosmic elements like the character of Eternity. I hope that we continue seeing more of these aspects implemented in other Marvel comics. I feel like it really helps make Marvel comics, stand out from really other comic books on the shelves as well. Fashion is always one of the many tools that I reach for when looking for inspiration, Wernick explains. You can tell so much about a character through their clothes, and this kind of visual narrative is something I love. Now you can imagine how excited I was when Marvel gave me the opportunity and space to work with the fashion of such an iconic character like Aurora. I'm really trying to give her a sense of style, he added. I imagine her having this kind of goddess aura, but she also has so much humanity in her. So the challenge here is to translate all of the aspects that define the way she dresses, moves, talks, the way that she lives. I'm having so much fun, and I hope fans enjoy all the tiny details that we're building along with her, all the surprises that we're cooking for this series. Yeah, so far I'm not quite sure what Marvel has in store for this Storm book. I think maybe positioning Storm closer to politics is a great way to take some of the aspects of Storm that make her stand apart from other characters at Marvel, like maybe Jean Grey or Kitty Pryde, who, have operated their own teams of X-Men in the past. I know Storm has previously been a leader of the X-Men, and it hasn't quite gone the way she anticipated. So just moving forward, I'm wondering if this Storm book will find a new place for her in the Marvel Universe. Frankly, if you ask me what I would wish Marvel had done with Storm, I would have loved to see Arakko still standing in the wake of From the Ashes. I feel like there's probably another, 2, 3, 4 years that the publisher could have rendered out of X-Men Red. Pitting Storm in this galactic setting to me is just a match made in heaven. I'm wondering if Marvel is ever going to get back there with Storm one day, maybe in the next publishing line that happens following From the Ashes. Still, though, I'm happy to see the publisher take on so many ongoing series for female characters. And also, I love the idea that Lucas Wernick is designing some of these characters. He's like one of the best artists at Marvel, period. End of story. And watching his career really get bolstered at the publisher has been such a joy to experience over these past couple years of X-Men comics. Okay, so this is Storm number 2. It features a cover by Mateus Manhanini, who we haven't talked about yet, and it's on sale November 20th. All right, so that's going to go ahead and do it for our Storm coverage today. I think overall, Marvel Comics has an ambitious first step over for this comic book. I'm really interested to see what happens next over for Storm, and I just hope some of the plotting really gets ambitious in the weeks and months to come. I am loving this stream. It's so fun to talk about all these comic books in so much depth and to really see how they're growing from issue to issue to issue. We are actually going to continue this same style of coverage on one of my other favorite comic books that we talk about nearly each and every week. I am just in awe of what author Zeb Wells and artist John Romita Jr. have accomplished in terms of The Amazing Spider Man. I think the last issue, 58 of The Amazing Spider Man, was one of the deadliest and most violent chapters I have ever seen. And issue 59 is actually following up on the very next moment from chapter 58, where Tombstone had this insane battle with Spider-Man, and he actually ended up taking Spider-Man out of a window to get as much violence as he can in the scope of one issue. Zeb Wells only has one Spider-Man issue left after this, and I think John Romita Jr. has probably drawn one of the most visceral covers on Amazing Spider-Man I have ever seen. This is definitely going to be a bittersweet preview because I think Zeb Wells has done such a great job across so many storylines with Spider-Man and Marvel Comics. Tombstone was in some of the very first issues of Zeb Wells' run, and finally watching Peter come into blows with the character in such a violent context just elicits such a strong sense of tragedy. Let's go ahead and check out a little bit about Amazing Spider-Man 59, and let's see just how crazy Lonnie Tombstone is going to get in these pages. A big thank you over to Adventures in Poor Taste for posting this preview. The mono fight that started last issue was so huge, it took over the cover to here. Come see John Romita Jr. does what he does best with the most brutal fight in Spider-Man history, Spidey versus Tombstone. We've called out every member of the creative team except for Scott Hanna and Marcio Menes on this issue. As you can see right from the opening page here, John Romita Jr. does such a wonderful job rendering this really big and blocky figure of Tombstone, just really showing him fighting it out with Spider-Man outside of this massive building over in New York. There's such just a great sense of motion that Romita Jr. is able to implement on the page. And while I haven't been a fan of every single one of his contributions toward this latest Amazing Spider-Man run, I think this is the perfect issue for this artist. Once again, we have Tombstone just dialing up the tension even more. He tells Spider-Man, "Are you ready to die for this?" He continues to just really amplify the intense feelings. He says, "Are you? Should have stayed out of this. It's between me and there we go. One of the most harrowing plot threads from the previous issue of Spider-Man opens right back up. Tombstone gets yet another peek at his daughter and runs to try and go do battle with her. So Spider-Man was able to interrupt Tombstone's battle with his daughter and seemingly save Janice. But Tombstone, out of the corner, out of the periphery of his eye, catches the sight of his daughter and runs across New York to go ahead and catch up to her. She's desperately trying to get away from Tombstone, and he's able to catch her right before she boards a train. So just really horrifying issue. I think Wells has done a great job really managing these incredibly tense plot details as we get to the final moments of Spider-Man. I am really scared for Janice, even though she's an incredibly flawed character that has made so many bad decisions across Amazing Spider-Man. I still empathize with her and hope that her father isn't going to be her end. Once again, great facial expressions carrying so much of the intense feelings that Zeb Wells is really implementing towards these scripts. I know this final arc of Amazing Spider-Man is going to stay with me for a really long time. I just love how ambitious the entire creative team is getting here. It looks like this issue is set to go on sale this upcoming Wednesday. Let's go ahead and preview the last issue of Spider-Man. I know we've looked at it before, but I think it's still interesting to explore how Zeb Wells is going to close out his run. Plus, we have a brand new article introducing some new revelations regarding the 8 Deaths of Spider-Man from Joe Kelly and Justina Ireland. So we've got some really fantastic Spider-Man coverage on board here. Give me just a second and we will pull up the solicit for issue 60 and see how Wells is going to leave off with the plot thread involving Tombstone and Spider-Man. I think this is one of the best John Romita Jr. covers we've also gotten to date here. Romita's so great at drawing the really interesting webs of Spider-Man, and obscuring Spider-Man's face ever so slightly with these shadows really builds up the dramatic tension on the cover. Special, and by the way, this is Amazing Spider-Man 60 on sale on one of the final days of the month here, October 30th. Special oversized finale. Zeb Wells says goodbye to the Amazing Spider-Man in style with his collaborators, John Romita Jr., Ed McGuinness, and some other surprise guests. When one era ends, though, another begins, as the 8 Deaths of Spider-Man get a special prelude by Joe Kelly. Man, I wish we had some reference towards Tombstone in this issue or in this solicit here. Definitely a shame that we don't have more coverage in terms of that. Overall, though, it looks like this issue also features Tombstone as a character. I'm seeing him referenced here in the League of Comic Geeks article. So I am just really interested to see how Zeb Wells is going to really sew up this plot line, and also what the relationship between Tombstone and Spider-Man is going to be in the future of this comic book. I feel like some of the friendly feelings they had towards the beginning of the run is going to largely dissipate as Tombstone just really violently assaulted his poor daughter, Janice. All right, well, that was the current really violent run of Amazing Spider-Man. Let's talk about the future of the publishing line with the 8 Deaths of Spider-Man. This is actually the very next issue following Zeb Wells' run. Chapter 61 is going to detail the new creative team telling this brand new story. Let's go ahead and see what Marvel Comics has in store for Amazing Spider-Man 61 in this article from William Shama. Get your first look at the 8 Deaths of Spider-Man kicking off in Amazing Spider-Man 61 this November. As Sorcerer Supreme dooms Spider-Man with 8 deaths, the upside for Peter Parker, at least he gets to die in style. This November, 8 Deaths of Spider-Man kicks off in Amazing Spider-Man 21 by Joe Kelly and Ed McGuinness. I know we've said this previously, but I love the idea that Marvel Comics is not relaunching their Amazing Spider-Man series for Joe Kelly and Justina Ireland's run with Ed McGuinness. The idea that they're sticking with Zeb Wells, I think, kind of shows the fact that maybe Joe Kelly and Justina Ireland have a little bit of reverence towards what Wells accomplished on this series. Okay, let's go ahead and check back in with this article. In the aftermath of Bloodhunt, Doctor Doom took on the mantle of Sorcerer Supreme, and there are some duties he'd rather delegate. Who better to face the scions of Sidorak the Destroyer, the ruler of Crimson Cosmos, than your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man? So Amazing Spider-Man is doing a really good job stepping into some of the synergy of Doctor Doom in the scope of the Marvel Universe by featuring a relationship between Doctor Doom and Spider-Man, opening up this 8 Deaths of Spider-Man story. As you can see from this opening page, it looks like Doom has rendered a brand new costume for Peter Parker, and I'm really hoping this is going to be a long-term Amazing Spider-Man story. I'm also loving the idea that Doctor Doom became the Sorcerer Supreme as a result of Bloodhunt. For me, that's just a really clear indication that Marvel Comics is really kind of planning things long-term alongside some of the movies too. Also, what a wonderful preview page here from Ed McGuinness. The background teasing Doctor Doom as the Sorcerer Supreme is so interesting to witness here on the page. In his preview for Amazing Spider-Man 61, Doctor Doom recruits Spider-Man and equips him with a new Doom-inspired armor to face the Scions of Sidorak head-on. Peter immediately puts this suit to the test, shooting mystical green webs to defend himself from the first Scion of Sidorak. I know that the Sidorak emblem is also what gives Juggernaut some of his powers. Once again, I love the idea that Marvel is really tapping into the continuity of their universe to really show just how interesting this new Spider Man run is going to be. It looks like Amazing Spider Man 60 is set to go on sale October 30th. And my God, just a couple weeks following here, we're going to get the first issue of 8 Deaths of Spider Man on November 13th. It is just so crazy as we do these live streams to watch one run close out and like 3 seconds later, a brand new run to kick off. Okay, so here's the cover of Amazing Spider Man 61 coming in from Ed McGuinness. I know we've also looked at this image previously, but it's so cool to see the different perspectives on the page from Ed McGuinness and some of the animosity coming in between Peter Parker and Doctor Doom as the Sorcerer Supreme we can see on the page. Also, there's just so much amazing detail here in this image coming in from Ed McGuinness. The character of Speedball is featured alongside Peter Parker, and it looks like we even have a satchel with Deadpool's emblem on it. I am noticing that some of the anatomy, some of the detail could be better fleshed out, but overall, I'm loving this page and how much energy it brings to this new era of Spider-Man. Here we have maybe one of the first meetings between Doctor Doom as the Sorcerer Supreme and Peter Parker as the Amazing Spider-Man. I'm loving just the sense of seriousness that Doctor Doom is bringing to his conversation and demeanor over with Spider-Man, with his exaggerated arms crossed and this massive red cloak teasing his brand new continuity reveal. We looked at this page previously, referencing the fact that Peter Parker is joining up in his brand new suit alongside Doctor Doom. And then we have this final one showcasing Peter Parker battling some of the brand new villains that are going to be featured in the comic book. The dark negative space in the background is so beautiful. And I think the red and green hues are giving a more visually distinctive vibe to the Justina Ireland, Joe Kelly, Ed McGuinness run than what we saw previously with Zeb Wells. So frankly, as I look across this preview, there is a ton to be excited about. I love some of these brand new science fiction scenarios that the creative team is going to be rendering towards Spider-Man. I like the idea of Peter Parker getting maybe buddy-buddy with Doctor Doom across this new run. I'm wondering how much kind of relationship coverage is also going to be referenced from Peter's really close relationship with Norman across some of the previous Spider-Man arcs as well. All right, so really fantastic stuff in terms of Marvel's ongoing Amazing Spider-Man series. We have one final article talking about Marvel's publishing strategy for the Amazing Spider-Man that is just making waves across the internet. And frankly, I want to give my 2 cents on it. We've talked about nearly everything else in Spider-Man's publishing line. So here we go. This one has been making the rounds across the internet. This one coming in over from CBR.com by Madi Ezekwi. My apologies if I mispronounced that name. Marvel editor says Spider-Man can't marry Mary Jane. This is causing so much turmoil in the Amazing Spider-Man as an ongoing series. Mary Jane is one of the most high-profile relationship interests for Peter Parker. This couple has also been married in the context of Marvel Comics, and it really seems like fans are just incredibly attached to Mary Jane Watson as a Spider-Man love interest. However, Marvel's editorial just consistently wants to bring these characters away from each other and move Peter Parker into a different context. We've talked about this ad nauseum in the channel, but if Marvel is really trying to keep Peter Parker around that 20s, 30s-ish age, matching him up with new romantic love interests is just a great way, for this comic book to move forward. And I absolutely agree with Marvel's editorial, despite there being so many people arguing in opposition to this. Let's go ahead and see what Marvel editor Tom Brevoort had to say about Peter Parker and Mary Jane's relationship. Marvel Comics editor Tom Brevoort insists there is no going back to Earth 616 for Peter and Mary Jane Watson. By Marvel mandate, the pair are not tying the knot anytime soon, following the nearly 2-decade-old event that erased their marriage. At the recent Baltimore Comic Con via Popverse, Brevoort discussed the character mandates in place at the publisher and how they affect Spider Man and his most enduring love interests. If you're working for Marvel, the ground rules are all the characters are Marvel's, and Marvel as an institution gets to decide what's right and wrong for these characters. Yeah, that's right. There's going to be some heavy editorial influence coming in as a result of Marvel Comics holding the IP of this character. There are certain things you don't want Spider-Man to do. He can get back with Mary Jane. He just can't actually tie the knot with Mary Jane. There are the ground rules going in. If you're going to work on whatever character, if you're going to work on Daredevil, you're going to have to deal with the fact that he's blind and he's probably going to stay that way for a while. So there we go. We have a couple more pieces of text here, but I think this is ultimately the most important quote over from Tom Brevoort that just got so much of the news cycle started around this story. I think for the most part, we've said everything we have to say about this. I really think it's a good idea for Marvel to just constantly position, new characters, new love interests towards Spider-Man. One thing I can say as a result of the previous Zeb Wells run, I really like the way that Peter Parker and Black Cat were starting to establish a more serious relationship, but Zeb Wells just really didn't stick Peter Parker across one singular love interest in his run. I'd love to see Peter Parker settle down with a character who isn't Mary Jane for an extended period of time. And frankly, that's one of the big things I'm hoping we see in Justina Ireland and Joe Kelly's upcoming 8 Deaths of Spider-Man run. I would love to see Spider-Man have a serious romantic love interest. One of the final issues that Zeb Wells wrote with Peter Parker featuring his romantic date with Shay was also pretty phenomenal and did a good job giving some more positive relationship developments in Spider-Man as opposed to all the negative ones we've seen across the most recent Zeb Wells run on the series. There is so much going on in terms of Marvel Comics X-Men, and we are right back in the horse's mouth here. One of my most anticipated comic books next to the adjectiveless X-Men series is Exceptional X-Men. I've been waiting for the longest time to get the second issue of this series. I don't know why, but it feels like the first one came out just ages ago. Here's a preview from Graphic Policy for Exceptional X-Men issue 2. So this is Kitty Pryde's team of X-Men characters who are really taking on some newer mutants over to the Marvel Universe. We have Bronze, Axo, and Melee. Bronze was teased in the first issue of the series as Kitty Pryde seemingly saved her life as she started the character of Trista began to manifest some of her mutant powers. Also, towards the end of that book, the character of Emma Frost was teased as one of the other main supporting cast members in the book. Also, this is, once again, just a tiny bit of a spoiler here, but Iceman was also teased as a revelation towards the back of the first issue. So there are so many big and interesting plot threads looming in the back of Exceptional X-Men. Kitty Pryde also is really trying to leave so much of her X-Men life behind. I think she's really kind of been ravaged by so many of the violent scenarios she had to embark on from Krakoa and is really just trying to start off a new leaf. So Kitty is currently operating as a bartender over in Chicago. Exceptional X-Men is written by Eve Ewing, featuring artwork from Carmen Carnero, colors from Nolan Woodard, and letters from VC's Travis Lanham. Let's go ahead and explore the solicit for the second issue. Kate Pryde's continued attempts at living a normal, non-mutant life go laughably wrong as she finds herself in the middle of a brawl started by a couple of headstrong teens with remarkable abilities, which of course they're terrible at controlling. She's sworn off being anybody's teacher, mentor, professor, sensei, or anything that reminds her of her old life, but will the White Queen force her hand? One of my very favorite things about Exceptional X-Men is the wonderful artwork from Carmen Carnero. Carnero recently contributed some work over to the Steve Rogers Captain America comic book from Colin Kelly and Jackson Lansing. Just the way she details faces on the page is so beautiful. This is the brand new character of Melee, who really hasn't been shown off in the book very extensively. And capturing her with negative space with Kitty is a really interesting way to position some of the first interactions with this relatively new mutant in terms of Marvel. Okay, so here's some of our interior pages. Let's kick things off here with Kitty over in Chicago, really serving all these drinks to prospective customers. I'm just loving all the really interesting sense of detail that Carnero is able to implement into so many of Kitty's expressions. We can see that she's finding some kind of joy in these really menial tasks. Also, I'm loving this really sly smile that Kitty is giving towards her text interactions with the character of Trista Bronze, who is featured in the first issue of Exceptional X-Men. The way that this character is really implementing Kitty towards the X-Men, even though she's trying to resist the call, is incredibly endearing across the page. Give me just one moment here. We'll go ahead and pull up the next interior page too. Here we go. This one's so beautiful and also references the fact that in the first issue, Kitty was actually supposed to go on a date. So in this one, we're going to see Kitty go on a date with the character of Nina as well. Carnero does a great job capturing Kitty's just movement in so many of these small panels across this one really beautiful page here. Also, I want to give a quick shout out here to Nolan Woodard's colors. I think they just make Carmen Carnero's artwork look even more beautiful and give it even more detail. And then we have Kitty meeting up with the character of Nina at a high school game. Also, some of the rest of the X-Men characters are also trying to sabotage Kitty's date. We have Emma Frost saying to Kitty in the background telepathically, "It appears that Catherine's romance with the mundane is more sincere than I thought, but I remain unconvinced." So interesting seeing Emma Frost try and divert Kitty Pryde's attention and really bring her back towards the rest of the X-Men characters. This is our final page in the preview. This one's really interesting too because it starts really steadily introducing the character of Axo towards the rest of the Exceptional X-Men characters. We can see him listening to some music in the background, and then we have these other students really bothering him and detracting from what he's doing. And then in this final page, he has a really interesting interaction with this character of Danny, who also identifies Axo as Alex over in the comic book too. So I'm very thrilled to see how this character is going to find herself, implemented towards what Kitty is doing. I wonder if in a sort of similar sense to Trista, if Axo Alex is going to find himself in a dangerous situation that only Kitty is going to be able to get him out of. I am loving how just settled Exceptional X-Men is. I feel like this page in particular does a wonderful job just weaving so much subtext into the comic book. The only book in the X-Men line that I'm getting, this level of subtext from is probably the main X-Men comic book. With Quentin Quire having such like a negative relationship with so many other characters in the cast. It really seems like Eve Ewing and Carmen Carnero are a wonderful creative team. I would love to see them work on another comic book following this. This has been such a wonderful book so far, and I really feel like these first couple interior preview pages are doing a great job following up on the really interesting plot threads that closed out the first issue of Exceptional X-Men. Man, I am so thrilled about that comic book. I can't wait to see, how Iceman is introduced to the rest of the cast and just where Kitty Pryde and Emma Frost are going to be when they finally reunite in the near future. Man, we have so much news to cover. I'm just so excited about this stream today. This is a brand new comic book that's actually an anthology of some previous X-Men issues. I The actual name of the comic book was previously leaked as X-Men Xavier's Secret #1, but today we have a ton of new information about this collection of the issue. The X-Men founder's answers for his crimes in X-Men Xavier's Secrets. This is actually a collection of the From the Ashes Infinity comic written by Alex Packnadel, featuring artwork from Diogenes Neves. Right before our stream today, I actually had the distinct pleasure of checking out some of the first issues of the Infinity comic book, actually reading nearly the entire first 6 chapters that are going to be included over in this collection. I wasn't a huge fan of the first storyline, really focusing on reestablishing Cyclops and Phoenix's relationship. This was also written by Alex Packnadel and illustrated by Diogenes Neves. But it was the second storyline, I believe, issues 3 to 6, covering the character of Sally Floyd, that really tapped into my imagination. Sally follows this really interesting plot thread towards the end of the Krakoan line of comics that transitions into From the Ashes. It was really, really fascinating for me to read this. This almost felt like an alias style of comic book using a different character instead of Jessica herself. Let's go ahead and see how Marvel is marketing this book, and if they're giving any more teases as to what Xavier's Secret could impact the rest of the X-Men's From the Ashes line of comic book series. This X-Men's new era has been a smash hit with longtime and returning fans. And this January, readers can experience key stories set just before From the Ashes in X-Men Xavier's Secret 1. The one-shot collects the first 6 issues of Packnadel and Diogenes Neves' acclaimed X-Men From the Ashes comic that releases weekly on Marvel Unlimited. Very quickly, I don't think we've mentioned it enough. Diogenes Neves' artwork is so expressive. It's so exaggerated. It does a great job with so many of the facial expressions, just like I think what Carmen Carnero does. However, once again, kind of similar to Ryan Stegman, I don't think so much of these figures have a ton of detail, but at least there's just a level of style that makes the comic book feel quirky and interesting. Across 2 stories, Packnadel and Neves reveal what drove Professor X, Cyclops, and Jean Grey, the 3 pillars of the X-Men franchise, to their current state. Witness Jean Grey's final moments on Earth before she took off on her galaxy-spanning adventures in Stephanie Phillips and Alessandro Miraclo's ongoing Phoenix series. And learn the full extent of Professor X's crimes during Fall of the House of X, just in time for the X-Men to declare final judgment in the Raid on Greymalkin crossover. In the wake of the fall of Krakoa, the X-Men are forever changed as Jean Grey prepares to take her place among the stars. She and Cyclops share a last night together, only to discover a hidden mystery that threatens to pull them apart. So that was the first storyline that I thought was interesting, but didn't manage to really capture my interest. Let's go ahead and talk about this second one that did. Meanwhile, what was supposed to be a mundane article about Charles Xavier's monstrous acts during the war turns into something far stranger for journalist Sally Floyd. Can the X-Men survive the shadows lurking in their past, or will this new era begin in tragedy? X-Men Xavier's Secret 1 features a cover by Martin Kokolo. Yeah, this cover is amazing that we have on the screen right now. And it's on sale January 22nd. However, if you have Marvel Comics Unlimited app, you can just go ahead and check this one out right now, and you don't necessarily have to wait. But issues 3 to 6 are so good. I'm happy to see that Marvel is republishing this. Okay, we're going to go ahead and close out our stream with some really interesting Avengers news. In a sort of blink and you'll miss it news article over from Marvel, it looks like the publisher is actually pitting the X-Men and Avengers against each other in the pages of Avengers issue 21. This one is also written by X-Men writer Jed MacKay, featuring artwork from Valerio Schiti. And as you can see here, it pits the Avengers directly against the X-Men, with Captain Marvel taking a punch over at Cyclops. Jed MacKay pits his Avengers against his X-Men in a story that sows the seeds for some major future developments. Captain Marvel and Cyclops square off, Scarlet Witch and Magneto finally confront their history, and Storm's loyalties are put to the test. I love how interesting and quirky Jed MacKay's X-Men team is. I feel like teaming them with some of his more just consistent Avengers characters are really going to get some interesting character interactions. I'm wondering just how deadly this fight is going to be, and if Jed MacKay is going to find a more compelling reason for the X-Men and Avengers to fight, as opposed to that massive event series that I don't ever think had the narrative stakes that it should. So really hoping for something big in terms of Avengers 21. This cover over from Valerio Schiti is amazing and just renders so much detail across these characters. Can't wait to see what sort of hijinks Quentin Quire is going to get with any one of these Avengers cast members. Also, we have yet another cover here over for Avengers. Looks like this one is illustrated over from Matteo Lolli. Once again, this one is so much fun here as it kind of combines Jed MacKay's Avengers and X-Men teams together, and maybe shows how some of their battle is going to shake out across some of the future issues here. All right, well, that is just going to go ahead and do it over for our stream today. I want to thank you so much for coming to check out what we had. It was such a blast talking about so many of these Marvel comics. Please be sure to go ahead and subscribe to the channel, and make sure to also like this video to go ahead and help us out in terms of the algorithm. We'll be back next weekend to continue looking into everything Marvel's publishing line has in store for the next week. I want to thank you so much for coming to check out our stream today, and I'll see you next week for another one. Thanks so much, and I'll see you soon.